wanted to continue with the conversation around centering community and really thinking about and leveraging youth perspective. And so part of that today, youth is all relative. So DeAnthony and Mattia are all both extremely younger than I am. So they are young people to me, even if they don't feel like it. But I want, and also Michael Blake is also young too. I don't want to offend anybody. When I had the opportunity to invite and engage, and when he accepted, Michael Blake accepted to come and be a part of this conversation, I was ecstatic because the work that he did in New York, the work that he did in the Obama administration has all been centered around, and I love the language that you used around community learning, this idea of learning from community and not necessarily co-opting or stealing from community the knowledge that they have, but leveraging that to improve policy, to change outcomes, and then the way that he has been able to actually embed that beyond his own local region, but to a statewide effort. And wanting to think about the work that Mattia is doing as a young person and who's been in numerous fellowships from DC to Europe to the work that she's doing here in San Francisco at USF, and DeAnthony, who has been over the years in a lot of different local political arenas, but has always been focused on keeping young people's voices front and center. And I just thought the conversation and the dialogue with them would be amazing to think about, like, if we're building a human rights economy, if we're building a human rights framework, what that would look like. But before, I was going to invite, no, okay. So I want to just invite them to share a little bit. I know we're a little late getting started, but Mattia, I will give you this this microphone. You're gonna have to figure out how to turn it on. Let's see, I don't have my glasses. So give it up for this next panel. Thank them for agreeing to come up.
It should be on. Okay, it is on. So good morning, everyone. My name is Mattia Phillips. I am a senior at the University of San Francisco. I'm a politics major, and I have a double minor in African American Studies and Public Service and Community Engagement. Thank you. I'm currently figuring out what I'm doing with my life after May. I'm applying to law school, applying to fellowships. Maybe Dr. Davis will hire me. We don't know. We don't know. But we'll see where life takes me. I'm moderating the panel today, and I will let everyone else introduce themselves.
DeAnthony Jones here with the Human Rights Commission. You know, I was born and raised here in San Francisco. Actually started my youth leadership development as a member of the Youth Commission, but even before that, as a member of a lot of community-based programs. And, you know, just am excited to be in space and just sharing some of those experiences and telling the story. So, you know, for me, I'm passionate about making sure that, like myself, who had access to a lot of mentors who I still keep up with today and are in this room, you know, being the one to come back and to serve young people like folks like Director Davis and community-based programs had helped develop me. You know, that's a passion of mine. So I'm happy to be here and happy to share some experiences with you.
What up, though? What's good? What's going on? How we doing?
So good.
What's up, Dave? First and foremost, to Leader Davis, thank you for letting us be in your space. Let's give her a round of applause, first of all. And second, to all the sisters in the room, I just want you to know, I don't know who that coward was that tried to come up on stage, but we're not going to allow anyone to disrespect our sisters in houses like this, right? So, so I appreciate, I don't know where she went, but the sister that walked them out, where's she at? Sarah?
Sarah.
Yeah. Wave your hand, wave your hand. Yeah, I see you now. I see you. I got a whole security squad in New York. You come with us right now. We'll make that happen there. right? We're in this space because we need to help our people. And as I often say, you don't need them to help your people. I come from the Bronx, New York, the home of hip hop. Okay, we had a yup over here. All right, I like that right there. Families from Jamaica. My mama was homeless, slept on church pews, worked for 40 years in a manufacturing plant. My daddy was a janitor at St. Barnabas Hospital, a union man. Public schools, PS 79, 118, DeWitt Clinton, went to Northwestern University with Prashanti right here. Okay, we got another Northwestern in the back. Okay, I like that right there. You know, go Cats. There we go. And had the honor of a lifetime of working for President Obama for 6 years before coming back home to New York to the Bronx. So we we'll dive into why we're here. But you know, the end goal at the end of the day is make room for them. And I will come back to what I mean by that. But I want that to sit with you on everything I say afterwards. Make room for them. Matai.
Okay, so our first question is, what does it look like to build power in community, and especially Black power? So for me as a student at my small age of 20, it's very important for me to feel powerful and to build power when people take me seriously. I may not have as much life experience as other people, but I have things to learn, but I also have a few things I can teach. But there's also so much for me to learn. And I feel like, especially for people who are my age and younger, it's nice when adults who are adults, you know, that pay bills and such, listen to us and ask for our opinion and really listen and internalize that, because that gives us the power to feel as if we can go into spaces. If there's not space at the table, we sit on the table, we make space at the table. So for me, as someone who's younger, it's definitely about giving power to young people who have a voice, listening to them, and also representation. I'm from Houston, Texas. I'm not from the Bay Area. But when deciding to come study politics in San Francisco, something that really drew me to the city was seeing how many Black people are in leadership. And I get to intern for one of them right now. So very exciting. But just seeing what people who look like me and come from similar backgrounds could do was very inspirational and made me have larger aspirations than I previously had. So representation and giving power to voices is very important for me.
I think, and especially being in political spaces, and I know Brother Michael here could appreciate this, and for those of us who have been in political spaces, I think it's important at the community level to define what type of power you want to build, because there's power that uplifts other folks, and then there's power that just uplifts one person. And I think what we have to really do a better job with our young people is teaching them how to separate pride from the power. And this idea that when you get in these spaces, you have to be accountable to the people who aren't in these spaces. And oftentimes, especially in the political culture that we have now, that can be overlooked. So I think for me, in talking to youth on this idea of power, you know, really getting them to think about the foundations of why they want to have power and access. You know, think about their why. There was this book by Simon Sinek that I had read a few months ago called Start With Why. And I think that for me is the most important part. How do we get to the foundation of power to where when we get it, it's not just about building ourselves up, but it's really about using that access for community. Because oftentimes what we hear from our young people, and especially me seeing it and growing up in communities where we have a lot of leaders, elder leaders, a lot of them are saying, hey, you know, no one wants to pass us the torch. And then when we get past the torch, there's no fire left, right? So I think that it's important for our elders and folks, even for myself, to remember that even though I benefited from having opportunities as a young person, you know, that just wasn't to make DeAnthony a better person. That was to make DeAnthony a better servant. So, you know, for me, understanding the roots of power and how to use it and how to not use it is important to really talk to our young people about.
So when for this first question around center the community and how do we center community, community doesn't have boundaries, right? Community doesn't have lines on it. You know, when you think about how do I help my community, how do I help people in my neighborhood, my squad, the folks on my block, I'm not just thinking, well, it's from A to B. It's this collective that I want to rock with. And so in that spirit, we always try to start with determine your end goals and objectives and then work backwards on what am I trying to do for my community. So because at the end of the day, if I don't have boundaries, if I don't have those limitations, there's going to be very different approaches and priorities and cares and concerns. And the last thing that any of us need to be doing is saying, you know what? Well, I know what's best for everybody else. That don't make any sense, right? You know, I'm from the Bronx, as I mentioned, we are the most diverse county in America according to the census. There is a 98.7% likelihood that any two people you meet in the Bronx be a different ethnicity. No place in the country has that number. Second is Queens. And so the different language, different backgrounds, different communities. And within that, there's many different specialties and community upbringings that come from that. For example, not Latino is not monolithic. It's Puerto Rican, it's Dominican, it's Colombian, it's Garifuna. It's that understanding that Black does not just mean African American where I come from, right? You know, because it could be Black that's African American, it's Black that's African, it's Black, it's West African, East African. It's also the dynamics that happen in Afro Latino. Is the deeper conversations that have to happen again around the history of who we are. If I'm talking to my brothers and sisters from DR, then I gotta have the deeper conversation about what's going on in Haiti or in the dynamic of Espanol. That's a longer conversation. We can go down that road. But in that space of community, what are the end goals and objectives we're trying to achieve? Because then we're all working from there. So that when we center ourselves, Fat Joe said this recently in doing a conversation with Charlemagne. He was like, look, you know, Black folk and Latino folk in the hood, they don't care about things differently. We care about the same things because we live on the same block, right? We're not coming at this like, well, I'm gonna care, you care about this, you care about, we go to the same schools, same community, same areas. So we should all be in this together. Oh, now you got us up on camera now. Okay. What happened to the closed caption they had going right there? And we're saying, right? Okay. Gonna be in LinkedIn, get the whole experience of LinkedIn right now, right? Yeah. So that's number one. Number two, though, is realizing that goals and objectives are not the same thing. That's right. Right? What's the vision of what I'm trying to achieve? How do I want to transform and have this legacy building mindset of a goal, but the objectives are the demonstrable pieces we're trying to hit on, right? So yes, we want to make sure there's a better education. We want better schools. But I want to be real practical. I want to make sure that these young cats actually can have a chance to go to school and graduate and have resources and pens and pencils and tablets. Everything going on with COVID, I'll get sick and tired of folks be like, well, you know, we're going to have remote learning. These young cats don't have internet at home. So let's address the objective of what's happened here. Concrete, lastly, to the point around centering community. You know, Eagle Academy, if you have not heard of it, David Banks, who now is our New York City Chancellor, there is no school in this country that has graduated more Black and brown young men than the Eagle Academy. It is a powerhouse. It is a machine. It's been incredible. And they did little things that were intentional of the objectives of centering the community, i.e., instead of having family meetings where you tell parents show up on a Wednesday night when folks couldn't get there from work, they moved it to a Saturday morning breakfast. Made common sense. Because I can't keep telling the parents, hey, show up and be engaged, but then it's at 7 o'clock, you can't get there. So again, the goals and objectives have to be separated. And then third and finally, when we talk about how do we center the community and what's the learning experience of the community, have the conversations on the front end to listen to the community before you make your plan. Too many times there are leaders that seem to forget that you have to lead people, right? You can't just write up a plan, just hope it's gonna work out in that way. You gotta actually build this out and be detailed around this. And so we did heavy listening sessions, 2, 3, 4 hours to really map out what was going on. And then usually at that point, then people start to break down the nuances of what have to happen there. So again, you know, realize your community does not have a defined line. Realize that you have goals and objectives and then work backwards from that. Separate your goals and objectives and then be intentional of the conversation on the front end so that you can actually make a plan that's intentional on the back end.
So on the topic of centering community, we do have a question about that. So how do we center community and support community while focusing on community needs? Specifically meaning not focusing on like making our campaign look better or our office look better, but community needs. So that kind of reminds me of when I was growing up, or my mom still says this because I'm still growing up. She always say it takes a village, and I really didn't understand. I just thought it meant there were a lot of people in my business. Still is. But that made sense when I decided to move to San Francisco to go to college because my village was now in Houston. I had to build a new village, the West Coast Village. And so that became really important to me, noticing how community and networks and relationships can change your life while also shaping your life and giving you new connections. So, something that I think a lot of people don't realize because most of the Black community in San Francisco does know each other or know of each other is that these relationships are what build the community and how you can find the problems that are essential that need to be worked on. Also, a lot of people need to go into the community because community doesn't bite. They usually bring a little food too. So people need to start going into the community to address needs and to hear the needs because you can't fully address someone's needs without hearing them. And don't forget your village because your village brought you up and they're still here. So that's something I kind of really try to live by.
One of the things that struck me earlier, and Brother Michael alluded to it too, just this idea of, first of all, recognizing the dignity of each and every person in your community. That's so important, right? And giving them agency and giving them empowerment for their own sovereignty, right? Encouraging them to speak up for themselves. And then also, you got to walk a fine line too, because the Black community is not a monolith as well. It's a megalith. And even within neighborhoods, folks may feel like, well, yeah, we in the same neighborhood, but nobody ever intentionally names my neighborhood. We learned this, and for me, it was working during COVID, um, handing out masks and PPE. And, I was in this community in San Francisco, Sunnydale, right? And Sunnydale is like, man, they always say Bayview Hunters Point, but Sunnydale is over here too, right? And so I think it's also about understanding the megalith in your own communities, and then you approach it with the assumption that everybody in community that look the same are connected with each other. I know one of the big things that I'm passionate about is this idea of making sure we're uplifting Black LGBTQ folks, because we know in community institutions, oftentimes they have been overlooked, especially when we think about community institutions like the church. So it's all about understanding that even within community, there's folks who have been overlooked in your own community, on your own block. So you have to be very thorough in making sure that everyone feels like their dignity is individually recognized. And then you can come back and you can say, hey, this is what community is saying. And then I'll leave with this too. It's also important to understand folks who say they're community leader, because you then have to ask the question, well, who has that leader had conversations with? Because sometimes community leaders may come and they may say something, and then there's other community folks in the room with that leader, like, you ain't asked me that. So it's also important to realize that if you are community leaders, there's an accountability in making sure that you're also talking to folks, because if folks come to you and you say, well, this is what my community is saying, and you haven't had discussions with nobody in your community, that's going to eventually get checked out in the open. So I think it's also important to realize that, hey, if you're going to carry the voice for anybody, make sure you're carrying their voice and not your pride.
You want me to answer this one too or the next one?
These questions are for everyone.
Okay, I'm following your lead. You're the moderator, making sure right now. Okay. So and you all can appreciate where I'm about to go. This in San Francisco obviously has a sports energy about it, or if you were in Oakland, same point here. Be excited about being a specialist in something in your community. Be excited about being a specialist in something in the community. Oh, now, why is that relevant for the center of community? And I'm gonna go slow. I'm presuming you're interpreting back there. So I'm gonna go slow, sorry. So when COVID was occurring and any kind of crisis that happens, when crisis is going on and things are happening very quickly, immediately people will start to turn and try to figure out, okay, I need help, I need support, I need resources. And a lot of times what happens is that we get delayed in helping people because there's too many generalists. As we think about this premise and being a Human Rights Commission, go back to what was going on in the 60s and bring it back here. One of the reasons why they were so successful is, yes, King was giving speeches, but you had Andy Young and Dr. Dorothy Irene Height and Julian Bond and John Lewis. They were specialists in what they were focused on. John Lewis was very focused. We're gonna mobilize the young people. That is my lane. Andy Young, you don't wanna rock with us? We will shut down the economics in your business. Julian Bond, we're gonna talk through the policy. There was an intentionality. Be excited about being the specialist in your community, because when things hit the fan, too many times we are delayed because we're talking to too many people. So we're trying to address human rights concerns, and everyone's trying to tell you they can help you with human rights, but they can't tell you what they actually can do. So I'm very clear from the time I was a staffer to the time I was elected to now running my own companies. I want you to know that I'm a specialist in some specific things. I am very focused when it comes to Black and brown boys in education. I have specialized in that through My Brother's Keeper work. I've been doing that. I'm gonna keep doing that. I am a specialist in when it comes to minority women-owned businesses and what goes on in technologies and the efforts around that. And you know what? And we talking, having real talk, going back to the sports analogy. When you're watching a football game or you're watching a baseball game, at the end of the game, if you're watching the Giants, if I'm watching the Yankees, they bring in someone in the seventh. Well, we going to the playoffs. I don't know what y'all doing, but like, y'all praying, right? Okay, right? Okay. Next year, right?
My team,
But if it's like the seventh inning, we're not even gonna talk about the A's, but if it's the seventh inning or the eighth inning, right? What happens at the end of the game? They bring in a specialist, right? If you're watching the 49ers, you're not just wanting someone to be an okay quarterback. You want someone who could do their thing. They had Garoppolo. They're like, yeah, that's cool. We're gonna get Trey Lance. Y'all still with me?
I'm with you.
Take pride in being a specialist, because when we talk about centering of community, when things are happening, then I know, you know what, I'm calling this person because you do that. And why is this get tied to the question? Because we have to get better at asset mapping before the crisis. Too often we like, oh man, everything's jumping off in real time. We're trying to figure this out. You know, you should take pride in doing the work before things are happening, right? Superstorm Sandy hit New York several years ago. We realized a lot of the businesses weren't communicating with each other, right? So there was about 212 businesses that were in like a 10-block radius. And it got granular to the point where this business, this bodega, was the one that has all the good tomatoes. We got to that level. And that one right there has all the different hardware equipment that you're gonna need. And now, no matter what happens, people can utilize those resources. So again, I wanna be real practical out here on what we do in terms of centering the community. Be excited being a specialist. Be focused on asset mapping. And then lastly, and I talk about race very directly. I think too many times we don't talk about race directly. Don't shy away in embracing that you dope and that you're good at what you do. And too many times when we have this conversations around community, people are like, well, I don't, I want to, let me fall back. Let me not talk about that. No, I know what I'm doing. I know exactly what I'm doing. And own that space. Don't say I'm just 20, say I'm 20. Right? Be real clear about that, because too often we are not embracing that you are an expert in what you do. And if we having real conversations, white men have no issue telling you what they think they can do. At all. No problem. Hey, they've never done it in their life, but all of a sudden, they're that expert, they're EVP. And if you're a white man in the room, it's all good. You're gonna be just fine. right? But we have to do that because too often in our community, you have people that are trying to be saviors of your communities, who are trying to come in and try to tell you, I know what to do, even though you have been the one doing the work. And your organizations know what's actually happening. You actually understand, you know what? They tried that 3 times. It didn't work. So let's do it this way. I ain't never lied. I'm with you right now, right? So again, tie those 3 pieces together. Be excited in being the expert and the specialist. Do your asset mapping before the crisis. And don't shy away from telling people that you're dope.
I mean, it's hard to follow up, but I just like, just while it's on my mind, you know, Brother Michael here had me ideating on this idea about just leadership too. And sometimes leadership also means knowing when you're not the one who should be front and center. You know, the practice of leadership is not about your titles. The practice of leadership is more internal. It's this idea of, hey, I know I can't do that, and I know somebody else can. And respecting that, because oftentimes too, we want to size up people. Well, they can't do everything I need you to do. Well, Draymond can't score a lot of baskets, but he can sure defend and run an offense, right? And everybody was hating on him. You know, the world champion Golden State Warriors. We're praying for your Knicks. we praying real hard, but
The 27-time world champion New York Yankees. Let's not start a sports conversation in here. Turn the mics off.
Listen.
Turn the mics off.
Look, I done started so like that community division. I'm sorry. But really, like leadership, you know, a lot of times people get confused about just running stuff. A lot of times it's about knowing when to step back too. And you know, you talked about our early leaders, and there's a misconception that goes around that Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, you know, they were at odds. No, they just had an understanding of what they were good at and how they were good at it. You know, what did Malcolm say though? He said, you either deal with me or you deal with Martin. So that was a silent assist. Like, hey, Martin, I'm trying to push them your way, but if they give you problems, just let me know on the side. And you see, this is how we got to operate. We got to know how to protect the folks who are in these institutions trying to make the change and be ready to stand up for them. But folks in these institutions have to also understand when to defer to community and when to let them take a battle on. Hey, like community, you know, I'm in this space. You know, I need y'all to take this. And in community, like, hey, we need you to take this. So it has to be a partnership, and it has to be a partnership of strengths.
I like that. Oh, you settled your sports beef. Well, going off of that, how do we keep the balance between leveraging institutional and community partnerships? Because a lot of the times, people who are in leadership in institutions do have a savior complex. So how do we let them know when it's time to bring in the community specialists?
Let's see who remembers what I said earlier. Make room
For them.
for them. You probably picked up on my cadence. I'm also a preacher. So I'm gonna do this real simple anecdote to your question. And this is relevant regardless of your faith. So stay with me on this, okay? People too often misinterpret the scripture and the verse around Jesus' birth. They misinterpret it to say that there was no room for Mary and Joseph. It actually didn't say that. It said there was no room for them. Jesus was a man of color, a refugee, a homeless man. And so therefore, the innkeeper, who clearly had room, who could make room for people that he felt like had money, decided there's no room for these poor folk. No room for these people that are not like me. No room for them, because there clearly had to be room for anyone else. So they did decide not to make room for them. Why is that relevant here? Because too often the institutions are not making room for us. And then we are wondering, well, this institution is not helping me, because you don't have people at the institution that are leading it in positions of power to change things for our people. So I'm real clear. When I look at an institution, who runs the budget? That's my first thing. Everything else you're talking about is real cute in the door. Who runs the money? That's what I want to know. Who decides on signing the check? And I'm not saying that you, when I'm talking to you, that you are not critical. You are absolutely critical. But I need to understand when we leave from this conversation, who is the person that's actually making the decision here? Because then I need to make sure that the institution understands how you're making room for them. Because I can't leave it just to you in the individual community builder and community leader that you are and say, I need for you to carry the load. That's not fair. You have to have a lot of people that surround you who understand the mission. So they can go to that institution, because at the end of the day, if the institution already believed in it, they would have been doing it already. And a lot of times when we're doing this work around human rights, you are trying to convince an institution and individuals with institution who don't care about what you talk about to do the right thing. Because otherwise, we wouldn't be having these conversations. I still have not found the white civil rights organization.
Wow.
Still looking for it. Again, that's not a negative, it's not pejorative. I'm just being practical. To your question, the institutions were created because no one was making room for us. And so you have to be very intentional around that strategic building that you're doing. Number one, who runs the budget? Number two, how am I aligned with your objectives and my objectives? Because too many times we're going into these conversations and I'm trying to convince people like, hey, we should be doing these things. And like, yo, I don't even care about that. What you're saying, that sounds nice, but there's no connection to me. There's no connection to our bottom line. Brian Stevenson said, the opposite of poverty is not wealth. The opposite of poverty is justice. So you have to tie both of those together when I'm going to the institutions. Lastly, when we think through the dynamic of the institution, we need to be better about building our own institutions and supporting each other rather than saying, you know what, if you win and I can't win. That's nonsense. That's nonsense. And too often we get in the zone. I'm sure no one in this room has ever done what I'm about to say. The RFP comes out, request for proposal comes out, right? I'll see some folks ready to start. I didn't even say anything yet, right? Comes out. It starts asking about who can do what in these different communities, right? Everybody applying for the same thing, then you get $10, right? As opposed to a few miles up the road, they made a decision, you know what, you're gonna be the lead, and we're gonna be intentional of how we rock with you, and then then I'm gonna subcontract with you, and you're gonna be and then we're gonna be, and then when this next RP come out, then you're gonna be the one that's the lead, and we're not all gonna keep, because at the end of the day, if I got 70 RPs coming my way to try to fix the issue, I'm not paying attention to any of y'all. So very practical in terms of the infrastructure and the institution around that. I'm focusing on institutions that are dedicated to our people. Y'all got your phones? Take your phones out right now. We're gonna do a very quick, come on, take them out. I know you got your phones out. Come on, right? Well, I have money in a lot of stock right now. I mean, I got Ethereum. We can do that conversation too. We can talk about Solana. We can do all that right now. You know, okay? We can talk about that too. That's what I need. I love doing events with Black folk. You know, just call and response just because, right? So, FinTech Future Coalition. FinTech Future Coalition. I want you to find again. FinTech Future Coalition. I want to pull up FIN Tech Future Coalition. I want you to find this. I want you to rock with what we're doing here. There's a coalition that several of us have organized. FinTech Future Coalition. That's it. I want you to sign up and join what we're doing. And all that you're doing there is realizing that we need to build a new institution that's actually helping us. And that means there can be a coalition that all of us can be a part of. And at the end of the day, the reason I'm going here, Prashanti is doing this at Cruise, Heather Foster, another one of our classmates we're at Lyft. Too often, the economic game is not the game that we're involved in. And so that's the institutional building I want us to focus in on. So there's nothing else you take from what I say. How do we have institutions that mobilize for us and build with us in that way?
Hey, let's give it up. Let's give it up for Brother Michael here, because he hit on something, and we see this a lot even with the RFP process too. It's also an issue for me because a lot of times, because folks are competing for a small pot of funds, they not only don't think strategically a lot of the times, they'll bash each other. So you got other Black-led organizations bashing other Black-led organizations to try to get crumbs, right? But you talked about Jesus. Well, Jesus used the loaf to feed the multitudes. And I'm not saying that we need a Jesus in our community to do that, but we also have to remember the broader and the bigger goal. Maybe you go in with the strategy that says, well, let's 5 of us apply, knowing that 1 or 2 of us might get it. And let's just work together on the back end, collective impact, coalition building. That's important, but that's a foundational question too. Everything that's shiny is not rooted in the foundation. I'll give you a perfect example. 2-3 blocks from here, you got Millennium Tower. Luxury condos. The building is tilting and leaning. Why? Because it was never rooted in the foundation. And it looked good. Housing values are, 2 people spending $10 million. I think Joe Montana got a place up in there. But it's lost its value because the building wasn't rooted in the foundation. Well, I'm sure he don't live there no more with it leaning. but the point, for me, that whole building for me represented a broader theme. And this is this idea of us getting back to what our foundation is as community. So I'm getting the watch signal by my director. So I'm on heed instruction here. But, I think it's just important that we're rooted in foundation in this.
Okay, so before we're done, I'll just ask for closing remarks, maybe less than a minute.
Well, we're going to pray on that. But, for me, it's all about making sure that we get back to what the foundation, we as Black and Brown communities, but, from my view, the Black community, let's get back to looking at what our foundation for dignity is for each other and realizing that not everybody, who's Black is a Christian. Not everyone who's Black subscribes to any religion. Not everyone who's Black is straight. Not everyone who's Black doesn't have a family, has a family. So we have to make sure that when we talk about the Black community got to mean community. And has to start with the foundations that we're laying so that our young people can pick up the torch with some fire still left in it.
First, let's clap it up for a dope moderator that we have right here, Material, right? Okay. If I can be helpful in any way, I know I'm leading a session after this, right? But if I can be helpful in any way, I'm gonna give you my email and social media right now to be very practical. My email is Michael at Atlas, ATLAS, strategy.group. Michael at atlasstrategy.group. That goes directly to me. Okay. Michael at atlasstrategy.group. If you can't reach me that way, you can also send me a message on IG or Twitter, which actually will check directly. IG is Mike Blake 1922. You don't have to, baby girl. It's okay. You want to talk to me about Apple stock? I remember right now. So if you're on Instagram, Mike Blake 1922. If you follow me, I can message you. Or Twitter is Mr. Mike Blake. Twitter is Mr. Mike Blake. Assemblyman Haney, thank you. I know you're gonna be speaking momentarily. This is where I end with. There's a lot of coalition building that's happening right now that we got to rock with. We are in a period in this country that I call a reparations moment. And I know that Robin Ruth Simmons is speaking tomorrow from First Repair. We have to approach everything with that lens. And that's the reason why we're leading 2 different things, that if I can be helpful, especially to the students in any way. Our company is Atlas Strategy Group. We focus on helping entrepreneurs of color grow and scale. But I also run Next Level Sports Entertainment. We are the only national Black-owned sports TV network in the country. We're in 26 million homes in the US. We're in 106 million homes globally. Why? Because too often I've been tired of watching Black and brown bodies only be players on the field and not be owners and presidents. And so if you want to rock with us in any of those spaces, please do email, a message, and follow up. And again, we bless and appreciate you and look forward to spending some more time with y'all today.
Well, thank you. The last thing I would say is to remember to take space. So do be amazed and show people who you are. Be proud that you're a specialist, but don't forget to make space for the people that are always left behind because we can't be a community unless everyone's involved. So.
I wanted to just thank again and appreciate Assembly Member Haney for being here with us today and provide space for him to speak.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, give it up one more time for that panel. That was great. The first thing that I'll say is I hope somebody's going to hire a Mattia when she graduates. Yes, I hope that's what that card was. It was really a powerful panel, and you all did an extraordinary job. I wanted to come and say hello and just provide some brief remarks, and then I'll allow what is really just an extraordinary 2 days. I just looked over the agenda and just an extraordinary program that is being put together here at LinkedIn. I do have to give it up, as everyone I'm sure has, for Director Davis, who is just such an extraordinary community leader. We've known each other. She ran programs in the community for years. I served on a board that she was a part of, and I've just been so grateful that she has continued the work and grown the work and innovated the work. I do want to say, is the Bronx in the house? Okay. Well, welcome, Blake. We've known each other for many years. We both worked for President Obama years ago, and I had to look up on my phone to make sure I knew when the next Knicks Warriors game is, so we could invite you back here to see what a great winning team and franchise looks like. Or are you a Nets fan? A Knicks fan. All right, good. You're invited November 17th. D'Anthony and I will take you to that game, and there could be a wager or whatever it is that you want to do with that. And D'Anthony, I just love and respect him so much, and so many of the people in this room, and just to see his leadership and also his courage. You know, it's hard to when you see something wrong to stand up and do the right thing always. It's even harder when you're sometimes speaking against the people that you may work for, or even people that you respect and love, to say that you disagree. And he's done that, and we owe him a huge debt of gratitude, and just can't wait to see all of the things that he will continue to do for our city. I will be brief. I was asked to say a few words about guaranteed income, universal basic income, which I know is a part of the conversation, and that's happening here as part of this conference. I will say, first of all, that I'm really grateful to be here at LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is one of the few tech companies where I'm pretty sure I know what they do. You know, sometimes I'm asked to speak at Salesforce or something. I'm still not exactly sure what Salesforce does, but they keep getting more and bigger buildings. But LinkedIn, I'm pretty sure I know what they do, and I'm really grateful that they are having this space here and opening themselves and partnering with the community. And the other thing that I'll say about LinkedIn is it's a good reminder that very often, sometimes the most simple, most common sense ideas are the most powerful and transformational ones. The most simple and common sense ideas are the most powerful and transformational ones. So there was an obvious problem that all of us understand, which is how do I connect with people who may have opportunities for me? How do I find people who may have the skills and experiences that I need for my company? How do I build a network? And LinkedIn said, well, how about we just create a resume that you put online and have ways that you can search through that, ways that you can connect from that. And because of that, they have completely transformed the way that we interact with each other and the way that we find opportunities for ourselves and our big ideas. And that same concept is something that we need to extend into policymaking and movement building. Far too often, it is because we make things complicated that we're unable to solve them. In fact, I think that the tool of making things complicated is actually one of the most powerful ways that the status quo is maintained. That we make things way more complicated than they are in order to keep them the way that they are. And so what is at the root of the challenges that we face as a community that you all are talking about extensively here today? Fundamentally, it's poverty. Fundamentally, it's that people don't have enough to be able to provide for their basic needs. We know that interacts with a lot of different issues: educational inequality, systemic racism, causes and effects, of course. But at the same time, we know that the root of the issue is very simple. And so because of that, we have all of these conversations. There's a lot that we need to talk about around that. But fundamentally, the solution to that is actually pretty simple. To solve poverty, you need to give people money. You need to give people cash. And it's actually not that big of a, not that complicated in that way. And so people have made this a lot more complicated than it needs to be. If we see in San Francisco, as we do, the top high income folks are making 27 times as much as people who are low income. Highest level of inequality in the Bay Area is happening right here in San Francisco, one of the worst rates of inequality in the entire country. We know that that's even exacerbated when you look at racial inequality. $130,000 median income of a white household here, $30,000 for a Black household in San Francisco. So we need to improve our schools. We need to increase access to job opportunities, but we also have to get at the heart of what is causing this problem, which is poverty and the ways that our systems and structures reinforce it. So guaranteed income is a way that that's being done. It's now happening in over 50 cities across the country. It started with a pilot here in Stockton, California. Mayor Michael Tubbs, 5 years ago, came forward with a pilot. And what they did was they chose 120 families, $500 a month, and they studied what happened. And all of the assumptions that people made about that were negative, none of those came to be true. That actually those additional funds that people were given, they used for education, they used for food, they used to uplift themselves and their family members. And so that simple pilot has now been replicated in over 50 cities. Here in San Francisco, we have 5 of these pilots now. We created a guaranteed income advisory task force that was led by Director Davis and Brittany Chiquata, who's here, and others, the Treasurer's Office, and the state of California put forward $35 million for these guaranteed income programs. So that's a huge accomplishment in a short amount of time, but we did it by putting forward a simple idea and a simple solution. We did it by putting the people who are already doing the work at the center of it. This guaranteed income advisory task force was led by young people, it's led by people of color, it was led by people who were already serving these communities and knew what they needed. And we were focused on ensuring that was the case. And it also was about finding a solution and being relentless about expanding that solution to other places and to the state and beyond. So there's a lot of good ideas here. There's a lot of ideas that not just guaranteed income, but others that are very simple, but are transformational and powerful. And sometimes, as I said, the simplest ideas are the ones that are going to bring about the most change. So enjoy the rest of their conference. It's an honor to be here with you as the former supervisor of this area and the now assembly member representing the entire east side of San Francisco. Continue to come to me and see me as a partner for simple ideas, complicated ideas, big ideas, small ideas. We are in a time of tremendous change, and we need to seize that change to work for more people and more communities. And just down the street from here this afternoon, there are a group of janitors who are protesting because they've all been laid off because folks aren't coming back to office buildings. And that's the kind of thing that's happening all around us. And I'm going to go over there and get arrested with them if anybody wants to join us at 2 p.m. down the street, 250 Howard. And what is happening is that the systems and the structures and the economic approaches that have been taken are in flux, and that's creating a lot of pain. But we have to turn that pain into purpose. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it.